Good Tuesday afternoon, everyone. I hope this day finds you doing well. Before you come into the chat, please hit the thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't already, and share this video. So, today it's a lot cooler here in southern Indiana, but that's the way southern Indiana is. But we know we've already reached the first day of spring, so we are hopeful that the weather will improve as time goes on. And it usually does, and then it gets hot, and then it stays hot. So, anyway, I decided to do today's lesson on worrying, and there's Lenore. Welcome in, sweetheart. Because as we all know it, it's a very strong human emotion, and I'm doing really well. We went from like over 80 degrees to 60 degrees. So, the weather's like that here. It's up and down, and then finally it'll get hot. And there's Leslie. Welcome in. And then it'll get hot again. But yeah, that's typical southern Indiana weather. We still have dogwood winter, and then we'll have blackberry winter, and I think there's another one. And have you ladies ever heard the term, if it rains on Easter Sunday, it'll rain 7 Sundays in a row? That's what my mother-in-law always said, and it seems to have panned out that if it rains Easter Sunday, it's going to rain 7 Sundays in a row. Thank you, Lenore. Please hit that thumbs up. I appreciate it. So my husband, he's gone up to the homes and getting the weed eating done. And there's Doug. Welcome in. Okay, Doug, because I know after you have a sale, you're extremely busy. And thank you for coming in. I appreciate it. But he's up to the house getting the weed eating done. And once you start cutting grass, it's going to grow and grow, but that's the way it goes. So we not only have ours, we have 2 others to take care of. And thank goodness a lot of it there's not a lot of obstacles in the way, which is a good thing. And thank you for dropping those links, Lenore. I do appreciate it. Welcome in, Leslie, Lenore, and Doug. I appreciate you guys being here, and thank you for the hearts. So today we are going to discuss something that every human that's ever lived has gone through, and there's nephew Troy. Welcome in. And that's worrying. We worry about a lot of things in our lifetime, from sometimes very insignificant things to, it's good to see you too, nephew Troy, to the big ones. So I'm going to pose this question to the chat. What is your main focus of worry? What do you worry about the most? And I'll give you guys a few seconds. What is the thing that you worry about the most? And I think you'll probably all have the same answer, but we'll give you a few minutes. And nephew Troy is deep in thought. What do you worry about the most? What is it that keeps you awake at night, that's on your mind a lot? What would that be? They're thinking. Don't be afraid to answer the question. Interesting question. Well, it's a good question. So what is that one thing that you worry about all the time, that your main concern is focused on? Right. And Leslie, she answered a good one. My health and my daughter, which children was the number one, and thank you, Leslie, and your health. Gina, Tanya and I wore our matching beanies and had great luck shopping with them. Good. I worry about people not being comfortable expressing themselves in fear of judgment from others. Yeah, it does. And there's many. Welcome in. And it really does, because sometimes we're kind of afraid to kind of step out in the forefront and say, hey, this is what, and even though it might be right, sometimes we stand alone in those views. But as long as it's cemented in what is true and right, you never have to worry about telling the truth, because it comes out the same way every time. And it does. Sometimes we have to step out when we feel like that, number one, someone is not being treated appropriately. And I mean, opinions are a good thing. That's how we learn. That's the typical way that we learn. But some people do have a hard time with that. Today, I'm focusing on putting all my worries that my family is going through right now with health and other personal things into God's hands. It's been 2 years fighting. And welcome in, Amber. You know what? Life is like this. We go through, for everything, there's a reason. For everything, there's a season. And sometimes we feel like our faith is just challenged, but God has a plan. And sometimes certain things need to play out first before but sometimes when we work, you give it to God, you pray about it, and He tells us not to worry because He is with us always, and He is. And you know what worrying does? It just kills your joy, because you're so focused on what you can do nothing about, but pray about it, and it consumes your time, your mind, your nerves, and your well-being. That's where your faith in God comes in, because your faith has to be stronger than your fear. And a lot of times, it takes a little while for things to get better. And never, ever forget that God's at work in everything. He really is. And sometimes the path may be long, and we might stub our toe and trip over things along the way. But worrying just takes away from our life. It's okay to be concerned, but to worry and worry and worry about things that we can't do anything about in the now, we can pray about it. And that's where our faith comes in, guys. And some things, like I said, we worry about our children from the time they are born until they get out and they start driving, and that scares a lot of us. They go to school and they intermingle with different children, and that's where that teaching comes in. You need to emulate what's right. And it says in the Bible, teach a child in the way it should go, and it may depart, but it will come back too. Because you have to plant those good seeds. And if they say, well, my friends are doing it, well, you say, here's the pros and the cons. The pros is you may feel like you're better liked by others, but the con is you do something and you're wrong, and there's consequences. And us as parents that really scares us. But you plant those seeds there, guys, and we're raising the next generation, and we want them to be ready, because I'm telling you, it's out there. Everything's out there. We can't be with our children 24/7. All we can do is instill those good things into them, and hope that they follow through. And I think another thing, thank you, Leslie. I think another thing, we should be approachable by our children. They should never be afraid to talk to us, in fear of retaliation. They should be made to feel like they can come to us and talk to us about anything without thinking, oh my God, if I tell her that, she's going to go off on me. You have to be approachable for your children, because you, in fact, are the safe harbor that they actually cling to. And you tell them, if you do this, this is going to happen. But remember what I taught you. And there's Dana. Welcome in, sweetie. And you just instill that into your children. And, they're going to, like I said, encounter many things. They're going to encounter other children that there's absolutely no discipline. Thank you, Amber. In their life, and they just kind of turn them loose, where your child is more subdued and knows what the rules are. I am so glad I taught my kids the good, bad, and the ugly. So no one tell them fantasy to always fight for their truth, right? And they should. I've always been this way ever since I was a kid. If I'm right, I'm not going to stop in my defense, because if I know I'm right and I know I'm telling the truth, then I will not waver. I've been that way since I was a child. I just believe in. But yeah, I think our children are a big worry. We worry about them, and sometimes that worry causes us to be, instead of a help, a hindrance, because we're, for instance, we as adults foresee things happening and we want to protect our kids, and then we drive them crazy, you know what I mean? And they're like, and then they reach that age where I'd say about 13, where they know everything, and they're so hard-headed. And sometimes children do things just to say, well, hey, I'm going to do it. But there are different stages with children that you really have to really instill those things, because hey, we were all there at one time. We thought we knew it all and everything about the world, and then we got in trouble, and then we're like, oops. And who do we run to? Our parents. My family too, Lenore. I don't understand the wise people can be so hateful, hurtful, even though one try real hard to show them affection, but we love them, and yet it seems we do not do enough. Well, I think that falls under anxiety. See, worry, anxiety, fear, it's all part of the same catalyst, where one leads to another, over analyzing things. And I'm guilty of that. I am so guilty, because we think of different scenarios. Well, what if this? Well, this could happen and that could happen. And I'm bad about that. I'm very analytical about things. I try to think as others would think, and sometimes that's a bad idea. But yeah, we never stop worrying, because we're parents. There are children, and then in the same breath, God never stops thinking about us. He knows what we're going through. He knows what we went through. He wants us to be happy. Yeah, remember, your younger self does help, because there's not a kid out there that they all go through the same things. Some of them a little bit earlier, some of them a little bit later. But, we're going to worry about them. But we have to know that, God, He's in the midst of everything. Even when we're worrying and we're irrational because we're worrying, and then we think of all kinds of scenarios and make the matters worse. I want to protect mine from everything, but I do realize she does definitely help. Yeah, it's my family too. I don't understand. And it's so true that I don't know. And see that's when we have to, you have to be forgiving. When people hurt you, you have to forgive them, and it's hard because you have to forgive them and go on and let God take care of it at least. And if you can't, sometimes our mouths get us in trouble. My mouth has fired off a few times, but say nothing and walk away. At least you will not say what you would have said that would have hurt that person and make God judge you for it. Sometimes you have to walk away from it and just let God handle it, because sometimes, I can't understand why so many people have so much hatred in their heart for other people, and that somebody done something and they just hate that person. And a lot of times, guys, they dislike that person and that person passes away. And it's like, once someone passes away, it's too late. So my hopes would be that that person, before they passed, asked for forgiveness so that they would know where their eternity would be. And a lot of times people are maybe mean and spiteful because of things they went through, and they can't really talk about it, and they act it out. Right. Sadly, they do judge through others without knowing the truth. That's true. But if you don't forgive them, it's going to hurt you worse than they are ever going to be hurt. That's true. The poison only eats the vial that it's contained. And if you have something in your heart and you hate somebody to the point where it just, they don't feel anything, but you do. In the moment you let that go, forgive them. That doesn't mean that you have to join the camp, but when you let that go, something that has been plaguing you for years, and you let that go, it is a freedom that you cannot describe, because you've let it go. You've let that monkey off your back, whether you know that or not. When people dislike someone and they just can't forgive, it's like it stays with them, and it's really not worth it, guys, to really, focus on the hatred of another person, because we're not supposed to hate people. We hate the things they do, not them personally. And we need to let it go. And when we do, we find that, for one, we're a lot happier because we've let go of something that we can't control, potential spam that we can't control. And when we can't control something, we feel helpless and vulnerable. And when you let it go, if you hold stuff in, yes, you get sick. It causes all kinds of things. It can even cause problems with the ones you love, because you're so full of hate that it just drips right over. I wonder if that's why God said to turn the other cheek, because two wrongs don't make a right. Right, Amber. Sometimes when people are in a heated conversation and they're trading blows words back and forth, then it never ends. If you take the high road and just walk away from it to keep you from sinning and saying something really mean and nasty, sometimes it's the best thing. That doesn't mean to be a patsy and let people run over you and treat you like crap. There's a lady named Dolores Cannon. She hypnotized people in their past lives. She says that hate and anger and rage turn into cancer. That's very possible because it has a metabolic effect on your body and that's very possible that, why be angry? Why live your life being angry, not being able to enjoy yourself and your life because you can't let it go? If it's very detrimental, it's very, very detrimental. It does no one any good. And you just let it go. And you can't change the mind of someone else because we're all individuals. We all have the right to think our own way. So sometimes walking away is not the worst thing you could do. But so here's some scripture, guys, that talks about that is very relatable to fear. So do not fear, and worry is the same thing. For I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. It will uphold you with my righteous hand. And then down in Peter 1, cast all your anxiety on him because he cares for you. And that's just part of having a relationship with him. There's a lot of people that, as even in our own families, we can't talk to because number one, we're afraid of judgment. Number two, they might think it's funny and it's not. But when you close your eyes and bow your head and take that to God, he listens, he knows everything about you. And that's where that relationship is formed because guys, there's some things that we can't handle that we deal with every day, and to take it to him, to give it to him, and that's what he expects. And that's where that line of communication opens up between us and God. And that's what he wants. He wants us to be closer to him, have faith, and trust him because he is God, and we can definitely trust exactly who he is and what he is to us, which is our creator. In Matthew chapter 6, the 21st verse, therefore I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat or drink, or about your body, what you will wear. Is not life more than food, and the body more than clothes? So he's talking about your basically, your body, which you've heard said is a temple because it is sacred and God made each and every one of us. So these things about, because God provides, what he's saying is he wants you to know that he's going to provide for you whatever your needs are. He knows what you need. He knows what you don't need. Yeah, my mom is like this, and it's really hard for me because she's angry. She's always like in a fight or flight, always thinks someone's coming after her. I've been asking him to help her. Yes, Amber, that sounds like a psychological thing, Amber, where she thinks that someone's coming after her. That's psychological, and more than likely that stems from her childhood. But that falls on that psychological part of it where, someone is always leery or afraid or something like that. And it could be something in her past when she was a child that may have happened to her. We don't really know about other people's lives. Sometimes our parents may have had a hard time and they never talked about it. And sometimes these things people keep inside, and after so long they manifest into anger, just lashing out, and just afraid. She's afraid, Amber, is what the problem is. And once she identifies what she's afraid of, she'll get better. But there is something either in her childhood or her past that really marred her and scared her. So maybe she needs a therapist or something to talk out some of this anger and rage and fear, because it's not good for you. And people that have all of these that I just read they're not happy people, and they live day by day in fear because they just can't handle something happened to her in her life that's caused that to cause her to feel that way. Maybe she can talk to a therapist or something. And sometimes, from the old school, they didn't talk about anything. They lifted that rug up and swept it right under it. And it remained a secret for years until eventually it comes out. But hopefully, and prayer absolutely helps. And I think sometimes when we pray, because God works in mysterious ways, He puts each and every one of us in a position to where we can witness to another person. I believe that totally. It's not a coincidence. And sometimes it just takes a little bit to get someone to talk. Because, guys, it's those things that we hold close to our heart that will destroy us. And thank you for the hearts, because things have to come out in order to heal from a situation. And sometimes healing takes a while, but something happened there. The reason why she's like that, and God help her, because I couldn't imagine how she feels feeling that way, that you can't enjoy your life. You're always, kind of looking over your shoulder and expecting someone to come at you or something. But, I hate to see anyone live their life in fear, and that's not how life should be lived. And sometimes, people keep things in, and that's the worst thing you could do, because through confession, there's healing, and there will be no healing unless the catalyst is brought out to the reason why that they're feeling that way. So let's go down to Matthew chapter 6, verse 34. Therefore, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. And that's true. It could be, it could be, I'm not a professional in the area, but it could be. But, we're not to worry about tomorrow. I mean, we live for today and get the things done that the day that we have to. Excuse me, because if we think too far ahead, we're already in trouble. And just think about, like it says, each day has enough trouble of its own, because we're in the world and things happen. We're exposed to different things, and some of them are not so nice. And we just, God does not want us to be paranoid. He wants us to be courageous, but not paranoid. I'm not saying if there's two people fighting, jump in the middle of it. That's not what I'm saying. But He doesn't want us to feel like that we are afraid, because He says, do not be afraid, for I am with you, and I will be with you until the end. And I absolutely believe that. And in John chapter 14, verse 1, do not let your hearts be troubled. You believe in God, believe in me also. And as we know, God is the three in one, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. He is the Trinity. And a lot of times when people first start going to church, they don't understand that. they're like, how can one person be three? He is the combined of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, because that's who he is. He is the Alpha, the Omega, the beginning and the end. So, a lot of people don't understand, well, how could he be three people? And sometimes people get confused. But yeah, it's so John chapter 14, verse 27. Peace I leave you, my peace I give to you. I do not give to you as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not be afraid. So now I'm going to ask the question, pose this question to the chat. What are you most afraid of? What would be your number one thing that you're afraid of? So I'll give you guys a few minutes while I drink this water. What is your greatest fear? I'll give you a few seconds, and I know a lot of people have to think about that, so I'll give you guys a few seconds. War between our countries, yes, many. That's true. It just relates back to what it has in Revelations. There will be wars and rumors of wars. Yeah, that's a big concern, because what happens way out there in the Middle East affects us as well. I had surpassed my fear because we just had, as a family, confronted it. That's good, Lenore. That's good. Sometimes to get that, to release that fear, it that has made your heart so heavy and has really plagued you. It's just, I'm sure that was a very cleansing moment, and to be able to talk about it as a family and say, hey, this is what we need to do, and we need to come together. Oh, I'm sorry, Lenore, that happened. I don't know what it was, but God knows what it was, honey. I love you, and you hang in there. You're going to be fine, because you have faith, and I can tell that your faith is stronger than your fear. Yes, because once you let the elephant leaves the room, then you feel better about it. And sometimes when your faith's stronger, it mends families, relationships, and it makes you stronger as families, where you're coming together instead of going apart. That's my biggest fear. Babies, children, innocent people are dying, makes me afraid for them. I don't understand why this has to. Well, yeah, you're talking about the war and it's really sad, guys, that sometimes there's innocent people are killed. We've had some US, there was a lady and two men that were killed from the United States, and plus the other people that's in the other countries where there's little kids, and they live in a world where they have a lot of adults, and all they want to do is fight back and forth and stuff like that. And it's a bad, I agree, Minnie, it's really a bad thing. But yeah, the little innocent children, and the babies, that is very this it does bother you, about that, the innocent people. But yeah, there's there's always casualties, and sometimes it's not per se who they're really after, it's the people around them that are totally innocent. That in the past, a lot of these leaders in these different countries have used women and children as to guard to be killed so they won't be killed, which is sad. I know many it is sad, but we have to keep on praying for everyone in our world, many. Yeah, because the world, God did not intend for the world to be this way. That's why God sent his son to the cross so that we may not know that second death and have a chance. When he died on the cross, that even though dying is sad, it was a really liberating day for all human beings, because he made a way that we would have a chance and not be, and sometimes the back on this here, I was doing some research and I found out there were people that even worried back in biblical times. And another one was where we can remember as we read, sometimes I can't believe I know it's hard to believe that so many things are going on in the world. We can just see the world evolving around hate, really. But sometimes, our military, we don't want another country to develop something of mass destruction, which I'm not saying that war is a good thing, but we also do not want another country to have capabilities to wipe out millions of people at the drop of a hat, so it's bad. And, people have passed away, and, hey, Joanne, welcome in. Good to see you. I hope you're doing well. But sometimes war is not good, but sometimes it's necessary. There was a war fought in heaven between God and Lucifer, and it was very physical, guys. And I think the last one standing was Michael and Lucifer. Of course, Lucifer lost, but if you read the Bible, it'll tell you about how of course, God already knew what Lucifer was up to, and he gave him a chance to atone for that, and he wouldn't do it. So there began a war, even in heaven, against, and then Satan did have a certain amount of angels that was with them, and it was not a pretty battle, guys. I know, that's what's so sad. And then that's another thing that we're probably concerned about with our children growing up in the world, and they're seeing this stuff either on TV or it's being shown somewhere or whatever on the radio. And then we worry about the effects it has on them being so young and everything. And that's where it really gets concerning, But there we had Martha in the Bible. She was worrying about daily tasks and were a common struggle. And she had the worry between the tension between daily responsibility and spiritual engagement. So God stepped in very quietly and helped her, but Martha was worried. And another one is King Saul, worry and fear of losing power. That's what's going on right now, guys. One side's afraid that the other one's going to overtake them and they're going to lose power. And sometimes when people get consumed and wanting power, they'll do about anything. And King Saul's situation was fueled by jealousy and fear when faced with the rise of David, a capable ally. Saul's insecurities transformed into alarming desires for control. There's nothing wrong with wanting to run your own company, your own country, but when you're trying to claim the country of someone else that where it doesn't belong to you, that's where the problem comes in. It's like, what if someone owned the world and lost their soul in the balance. And it's and then Elijah worried about the persecution. His flight from Jezebel was not simply a physical escape, but an illustration of the relentless grip that fear can have even on those chosen to convey God's message. And I think that comes in where, kind of in the beginning, when Doug talked about, being afraid to step out because of being judged by others and what other people might think. I think this definitely falls in that category. Here we had Elijah, that he obviously was the chosen one to convey God's message, and yet he was, it did say that people will be persecuted for what they believe. They'll be persecuted for telling the truth, and that's a bad thing. But I think that kind of goes right along with what Doug was talking about. And, sometimes, God doesn't expect us to pick a fight, but he does expect us to speak up for what is right. I know, for what is right. And sometimes when we do that, we stand alone, but it takes a stronger person to stand by themselves than it ever does for someone to run with the crowd. Sometimes, if you believe in something, it says that we'll be persecuted for what we believe in, because in this world, people think that you're born, you live, you die, and that's it. But that's the beginning. And it really depends upon where you're going, and people think that there's no accountability for their actions, maybe not on this earth, but it will be, in the time to come. You can't treat people badly and do all kinds of mean things and expect to inherit the kingdom of God, because it doesn't work that way. And a lot of people just think, well, I'm going to pass away and that's it. There's no accountability, which there is, because we all have to stand before God, and he is the ultimate judge, and he has already made the decision on if we spend an eternity with him or the other side of the coin. And we don't want the other side of the coin. But yeah, it's some people don't believe in, and it's right here in the in this Bible, and I believe it totally. That so let's go down. Here's a good one. Luke chapter 12, verse 24. Consider the ravens. They do not sow nor they reap. They have no storeroom or barn, yet God feeds them. And how much more valuable are you than the birds? And that's a good question. So, and it's hard to, when we start to worry and our imagination goes wild and we think of all these different scenarios of what could go wrong, and when we feel that anxiety and that fear and stuff like that, and the stress and the worry, You give it to God because that's what he expects you to do. He doesn't expect you to calculate, well, what's going to happen. He knows what's going to happen next. And why are you spending your time worrying about something that may not even come to pass? And of course, we're all guilty of that. But, he doesn't expect, I think when we worry, we kind of question God's authority in our life that, we know he's God. We know he created the universe and everything in it. But yet when things come our way, we worry. And I think that really questions God's capabilities of handling things. And we know that, he created the universe and he's quite capable of handling whatever. And if you spent more time praying about it than maybe thinking of other scenarios and what's going to happen down the road, then I think prayer is much better because it puts you in a place with God where he can bring you peace to your heart while you're going through this. He knows what you're going through. He knows everything you went through. He knows your hurts, your disappointments. He knows it all. But isn't it much better to pray than to dwell on, that's when God really puts us to the test, when he sees whether or not what our next move is. Are we going to dwell on it, worry, have fear, anxiety, stressed out, and stuff like that? That's what gets a lot of people have to go to the doctor for medication for that, because they're so stressed out. When there's one physician that can straighten that all out, and that is God himself. With God, there are no side effects. You don't get addicted to medicine. He has no side effects. But I tell you what, he has blessings, and he can give you peace, and he can calm your soul and your heart better than anything that's available on this earth. He really can. And when we learn to trust in him and live our life not in fear but in faith, is where we'll really understand where God's coming from on this. He loves all of us. He's been with us since the day we were born. He is powerful and he is omnipotent, and that is God. And we are put on the earth with people that have different attitudes, and some are nice and some are not so nice. And sometimes we have to learn to conform to, hey, that person might be rather offensive, but they're still a child of God, and we need to. And it's hard, guys. It really is. To think about it, it's so much easier to be loving towards someone that is loving back to you, but then it's really hard to be that way when someone doesn't love you that much. But you have to show and reflect love. And people, they can accept it or they won't. It's just like that. But you know what? You had stepped out and showed love to another human being, which is something that God expects from all of us. And, you did everything you could do. You were nice to the person and they just wouldn't come around. But let your conscience be clear, and don't exchange blows for blows, because that makes you no better and us no better than what they are when they're absolutely sinning by their behavior. But I think if we learn to trust more in God, unless, we're in the world and we see everything and things happen, but there is rest in Jesus Christ. You can come to him and pray to him, and if you ask for peace, he'll give it to you. And I know Lenore has went through that. I know she has. I can sense it. I know Lenore has been very very anxious. And finally, once the family came together and talked about it, then I do believe that God he cleansed her soul and her spirit. I know he did, because I can tell. It just, don't ask me how I know, but I can just tell. And what a great feeling that is. It's like, we're all going to have problems. We're all in the world. Every we see everything, and we're part of the world. It's how we react to the things in the world and who we go to when we need help, guidance, and just a quietening of our spirit, and to lift us up where we had been so down for so long. And sometimes we get sick and tired of being sick and tired, and there comes a point, well, you will just get down on your knees and say, and God already knows anyway, and say, I can't stand this anymore. I'm going through this, that, and the other. I need your help. And there's no shame in asking for help from God. So I don't want you guys to think that there's no shame, because he is the one that can take something god awful and turn it into a blessing if you allow him to. Just open your mind and your heart to the possibilities of what God can do for you. And there's Nana. Hello, Nana. Of what he can do for you, and just be open-minded. And I know the world is out there poking at us and everything like that. And we're like, my God, would they leave me alone? But then we can go to, a lot of people have a certain place that they pray, and go to that place and feel safe and pray, and God will give you exceeding joy and peace. And I guarantee you, because a lot of us from day to day deal with a lot of stress, and it's just good to know that there's somewhere you can go that is actually going to help you. I learned to stay focused and not give in to evilness. Yes, Lenore, and we're all guilty of it. There's not one of us on this earth that's not guilty of it. We just have to. And that's where God comes in, and he will give you strength against that. And that, a lot of times, the devil is relentless. That's right. Satan works hard and he never sleeps. And he can take a simple thing and turn it into something god awful. And the people involved don't even know where it come from, but they know that it's just so weird. But yes, worrying is basically, I'm sure we've all been there. We've worried and worried and worried about something, and the day came and it was nothing like that we thought it was going to be. Oh, absolutely. Thank you, Lenore, for dropping those channels. And we worried, and we thought 1,000 scenarios, and the day come and none of that happened. And if you prayed about it, you know why it didn't happen, right? So sometimes worrying can really steal our joy and keep us off. Life is really short, guys. And if we spend it worrying constantly and worrying about things that, all I can say is some people have very vivid imaginations, and they try to think of all these different scenarios. And, well, if this happens, that happens. And all it does is keep your mind from focusing on your life where it should be in the beginning. And thank you, Lenore. In the beginning, and stop over analyzing. I'm guilty right here. And stop over analyzing things, and just, I am guilty of that. And I'm really analytical, and I like to think in all these different ways. And sometimes it gets you in trouble, and sometimes it's hard to let go of that. But once you let go of it, and stop spending your time trying to figure things out after you've already prayed about it and let it go. I read a quote yesterday that said, "Worry just makes you suffer twice if it really happens." That's true. I mean, and there's so much. We was talking, Nana, about our children and worrying about our children, and that's a big one right there. In our health, if you have your health, you have everything. And we're always going to protect those children. I don't care if we're 90 and they're 40, we're going to protect them. And women are especially vicious when it comes to protecting children. I guess it's the mama bear syndrome, but we just have to, instill those good. Hey, Alfonso, welcome in. I'm having a blessed day. I'm here with you guys. Doesn't get any better than this, right? And, we always, no matter how old they get, we're still parents, and, we're just protective. That's why, I always believe this, guys. I always preferred to be around older people, and you know why? Because they have the knowledge. And I think that's where I was always really, because the older generation is so knowledgeable, and I just really enjoyed soaking up that information, and listening and stuff. And I always liked that, to be around older people, and that was always my thing, guys. And thank you for the hearts. Nothing wrong. If you ever want to learn something, be around someone that's older than you. I know sometimes it's hard when you are blind, because a lot of older people are afraid of me. They're always worried about my safety. Hey, Deborah, welcome in. And they will be, Alfonso, because they don't want you to get hurt or anything, and I really can't blame them, because I would be the same way. So, but maybe, Alfonso, I'm reading between the lines. Maybe you're saying you're an adult and you don't need someone to be so intimidated or afraid you'll get hurt. See, a lot of times when Alfonso's sight impaired, I even had neighbors chewed me out for safety reasons. Well, Alfonso, sometimes that's all right, Deborah. Sometimes, people are concerned for your safety, but then coming from your side of it, you're like, I'm a human being, give me some credit here. You kind of feel kind of childlike, but in a way, but that's what people do. They just don't want you to get out. They should do it. They should not chew you out. They should be gentle about it. But do you have a seeing eye dog, Alfonso? If not, you need one, because they would help you a lot. Dogs are real good. If you check, you may be able to get one through, thank you, Lenore, through some kind of, sorry I'm late, listening to words of wisdom. Well, thank you, Deborah. They might be able to get you a service dog, which I think would be great, because they train them. And maybe there's a program available where they can get you one. And if it's out there, if you're able to get a benefit because you're sight impaired, do so, because you may need a service dog. It could help you quite a bit. So he goes, daggone, those females are always telling me what to do. Unfortunately, I don't. Plus, it's too much of a hassle dealing with discrimination going on in my area. A lot of the time, blind people are discriminated against for having a service dog or a white cane. What is wrong with those people? Animal dogs are some of the best. Not only are they good companions, they what is wrong with those people? You know, if you have to have something to help you, I mean, I can't imagine. I mean, they want to complain and gripe, but they don't want you to get something that would keep you safe. Uber, Lyft, and often deny you from riding. Well, that's discrimination. I mean, really? I don't think there's anything wrong with you having a service dog. Let them get over it or whatever you need for your disability now. That's just insanity. Those drivers often claim damage to their vehicles. Where'd you say you lived again, Alfonso? I think that place is that, and you know what? Service the dogs are really smart. They're very handy, and they can help. You know, and plus they're good. Colorado, there must be a bunch of people with their noses up. One day they might get to where their sight's bad, and they might need something. I can't. That blows my mind. Well, how they expect you to get around if you don't have some kind of device or like the white stick or the service dog to help you? Do you have family that lives there in Colorado, Alfonso? Because that is just crazy. You know, everyone should have something. If you're sight impaired, you should have some stability to be able to become a functioning person. Just because you're sight impaired doesn't mean. I live with my sister and brother-in-law. I use a white cane regularly. And they're saying something about a white cane. Oh my God. See, that's what's wrong with people like that act that way and want to take something, look down on a person for wanting to help themselves that's visually impaired. One of these days they're going to answer for that. Now that is insanity. In my opinion, you should have a dog and that cane, a service dog, which I think would be good for you because, you know, the animals are smart, but I couldn't imagine living in a state like that where that is just so wrong. See, it's bad when people discriminate against a person that's sight impaired that can't help it. I mean, I don't know. That is just so wrong. You know, you have the right, Alfonso, to get out there and get outside within reason. Don't cross a busy expressway, just saying. But you do have the right to be a functionable human being, and you have rights too. Oh, I can't get over that. You poor guy. Well, let's go to the Lord's Prayer, and next week I will be on at the same time, Tuesday at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Let's see. There's people brings their pets into store, claim that them as service animals, which they cause distraction to legit. Well, that's their problem. I know. You're welcome, Lenore. The service dogs wear this little red thing over their backs that says service. If they're not smart enough to read that, and evidently they're awful, I better not say it, but you know, a service dog is usually marked as such. So sounds like they're really mixed up. But if someone brings a dog in there, it's not a service dog, it's not your fault. So let's go to the Lord in prayer, guys. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for the avenue to be able to come to you with all the things, all our fear and anxiety, and the things of this world that we just cannot cope with. Lord, be with those who do not know you, Lord, who do not know what you offer and the peace and serenity that you give when we go to prayer with you. Thank you so much for being there for us, for giving us faith and just a peace of mind that can come from no one else. Thank you for your grace and your ultimate glory. And be with us, Lord, during the rest of the week and keep us all safe. And we ask this in your precious, precious name. Amen. Anyone can actually get a vest and a fake certificate. See, that's what's wrong today. That's why there's so much distrust, guys, because people, well, just like the scams out there are getting worse. When your phone rings, you just never, I just, if I don't recognize a number, I won't answer it because I don't have time. You're welcome, Minnie, and thank you guys for being here. And I hope that this session might have really helped someone that may be dealing with anxiety, worry, stress, that could have some clarity on, where to go to God to give relief for these things, guys, because they can be overwhelming, they can steal your joy. And life is made for the living and not the worrying. So until next Tuesday at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, see you guys later. Be blessed. Help one another when you can, and love always. Bye bye. Thank you for being here, guys. Love you. Whoops, I hit the wrong button. Where is that? There we go.